1 second. Sibtain Uncle, inshallah, is going to be talking to us today about the Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri Community Diaspora, and it's going to be an explanatory overview. Dr. Sibtain Panjwani, former Secretary General of the World Federation of KSIMC, is the founder of the Awakening Project for KSI Muslim Community. It is a worldwide grassroots-oriented initiative that seeks participation and reform from community members themselves. Having qualified as a dentist from the University of Manchester and obtaining his MA in Medical Law and Ethics from King's College London and a PhD in Law from the University of Essex, he went to work closely with the late President Marhum Mulla Jaffer and the World Federation. After his death, Dr. Sibtain Panjwani continued to be an active Shia and wider Muslim community affairs. He also has a special interest in bioethics in Islam, having taught undergraduate students at the Islamic College, London. He has published journal articles on bioethics as well as dental legal issues. He currently operates on a freelance basis in both the Muslim community life and the wider academic environment. Salwat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Before I begin the substance of what I want to share with you, a couple of introductory points. The subject matter that I'm going to deal with is a community-based matter. And what I have done is I'm sharing with you the diasporic experience of the Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri Muslim community. And hopefully, and inshallah, it might relate to people other than Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri Muslim community, and so it may benefit all of us, inshallah. The second thing that I want to share is that my communal experience goes back a long way, both in United Kingdom and elsewhere. And so in 2011, I published a paper titled Awakening the Spirit of Inquiry, the Future of Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri Muslim Community. I sent it around to the community members globally, and lo and behold, I got very good responses and very important comments, and a lot of support. And so the Awakening Project got established. Now, the Awakening Project, its aims, you can see from there that it was established in 2011. It's mainly a grass-oriented project where I'm initiating discussion and change to the foundational institutions of the community. I found from my analysis the foundational institutions of the community are the family, the member, and the madrasa. If these three institutions, which are foundational, if they happen to be removed, then the community's existence is at peril. So obviously, the idea was to see if these foundational institutions can withstand the challenges of our time. And so what I was seeking was participation and reform from the grassroots community. And I started data gathering by way of seminars, interviews, surveys, and articles. And the analysis of all that is available in the website that I run. What I did was I did almost 5 global surveys. As you can see, I wanted to make sure that the communities also accept the fact of the conclusion that I came to about the foundational institutions, that is madrasa, member, and family, that they are the foundational institution. And yes, I got an overwhelming response of yes. I also then did Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri identity survey, the role of member today, our family life, and the latest one is the functioning of Jamaat committees. I've just analyzed that, and it should be published soon. But what happened was that in all these analyses, I got another dimension of the community, and that is the diaspora experiences of the community. And what I am going to do today is that I'm going to share that narrative with you so that you perhaps will find it interesting as to how we did become diasporic in that sense. So the title is Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri Community Diaspora, an Exploratory Overview. It's not an exhaustive study. It's an overview so that I'm sharing my experiences. I'm going to relate some of the events and tie it together, but detailed work is yet to be done. I'm happy to say that this is the first of my exposition on this diaspora topic, and I'm sharing with the audience in Asgherali. So can you see those, or it's very difficult? Can you see it? Yes, why this study? So let me put some mix into this exploratory view. First of all, we are part of Indian diaspora. There are 20 to 22 million Indians living outside India. And in United Kingdom, there are almost 4 million South Asians, or rather Indians from subcontinent. Almost over 1/3 are from Indian subcontinent, under 1/3 are from Pakistan, about 1 million from Sri Lanka or Bangladesh, and the rest of it is from Sri Lanka and elsewhere. And we are part of this diaspora. We number around 10 to 12,000 in the United Kingdom and 15,000 in the Western Europe. So we are a very small community, but belong to this Indian diaspora. The other thing that we should be interested in this mix is we should be interested in our own identity. Why? Because we should know what is shaping our identity and how it is being shaped. So if we want to understand that, we have to understand the nature of the society that we are living in. And then we need to ask some very important questions, like how did Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri Community settle in various parts of the world, and its challenges, etc. And so these are the questions then needs to be answered. The other thing that we have to put in the mix is history. How we think about history has changed. The way we used to think about history is one in a nationalistic term, nationalistic history. So we would study one country. The trend now is to study transnational history, which means that you study the history of one country and then see what is around that country that is influencing this country. So you study the factors around that particular state, and that study is transnational history. But now, more importantly, we are now studying diaspora history, where, for example, there is a lot of migration happening in a global world, and one needs to understand the social cohesion of the diaspora community and also their roots to the original land where they came from. So when we engage with diaspora history and transnational history, we tend to find that we learn a lot more. Regrettably, national history is a lazy history. It only allows you to understand one sort of aspect of it through a particular lens. If it's a colonial lens, you will understand it from the colonial mentality. If it is another sort of ideology lens, then you will understand it from that. So when you engage in a diaspora way and when you engage in a transnational way, then you have better understanding of the history. The last bit is, what is the meaning of diaspora? It really means scattering and sort of dispersal. But the important thing that I am concerned with, I'm interested in the Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri Muslim community dispersal from early 19th century from Kutch and Kathiawar. You know what Kutch is, where Kutch is and where Kathiawar is, or it's in Gujarat? Do we know where Gujarat is? Where? India. You know. Yeah. Okay. So the conceptual work that I have used to do this exploratory work on the Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri Muslim community is that I begin with, so this is the conceptual work. I look at the migration pattern, then the processes involved, acculturation and transformation, and the challenges here. So why, for example, I begin with migration? Because that began from our own historical record. I'm talking about the Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri historical record, that we began our journey from Gujarat in 1839. Why 1839? Is because the official record tells me that. So I go by that. So then we look at the process. We look at the departure of those people who migrate from the country of origin. Where did they migrate from? What was the situation like in the towns and villages they migrated from? And then the middle passage, which is the long journey they had to undertake in early or late 18th century, 19th century. It's a long journey. So before they undertake the physical journey, they have to do a mental journey. They have to prepare themselves. What obstacles would I face? What challenges will I have? What sort of food would I get in the dhow or the ship that I'm going to travel? And it takes a long period of time. I'm talking about 3 or 4 months, sometimes a year, to go from Gujarat to the coast of East Africa. This is where I'm relating my exposition. So, and then of course when they arrive, they have to put down their roots. And they are worried, well, I'm going to put my roots down in a new land, new people. And how am I going to sort of survive? And then of course, acculturation to the new land and transformation in terms of Athenization of the land. When they see that new land, it's a landscape that they haven't seen before. So what happens with the diaspora community, any diaspora community that you study, that they actually change the landscape, they Athenize the landscape. And then afterwards, they institutionalize the community or the diaspora. And so you see the transformation then occurring where you see building of mosques or mandir or synagogues, including schools, hospitals, and then they feel comfortable to live with. And that is what happens. You get acculturation and then transformation. And from our point of view, the Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri Muslim community, there are challenges, of course, with any diaspora community, but I'm looking at this particular community. Is the transformation of the KSI Muslim diaspora community integrative or assimilative or separate or what? As a matter of interest, how many of you have a Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri background? Or do you feel uncomfortable if I ask you to raise your hand? Ahmed, you're not from that background? Okay.
I'm trying to find out my roots.
Really? You're confused? Okay. That's a very poor thinking there. Okay. So let's look at migration now. When we look at the migration, when we study any sort of migration, well, in our case, we will begin with 1839, because that's the official record of the first person moving out from Gujarat into East African coast. So one needs to know what were the events surrounding 1839. One of the biggest events in 1839 was Indian Ocean trading world. That was this part of the world where India, that coast, west coast of India, was trading with all that area, and including all those other areas, Indonesia, Japan, everywhere. But this particular area was very important because from 2nd century AD onwards, this particular world was very influential. And it was very influential in the 20th century as well. It dominated the trading. So when it dominated the trading, what happened was a lot of Indians went from there, west coast of Gujarat, to East African coast, Madagascar, Aden, all those areas, including some of the land in Arabian Peninsula. So, and among them were Gujaratis, because they took advantage of that. It really became a migratory community in many ways. In 1840, they did a survey. There were 1,200 Indians actually living in the eastern coast of East Africa, including Madagascar. And among them were Gujaratis. And the record also shows that wherever there was a trading facility in a town or village, there was a Gujarati there. So what does, does anyone know what Gujarati means? Where does it come from? It comes from Gurjarar, Gujral. Gujral means cattle rearing. We were cattle rearers. And some of us also tell us we were soldiers as well, but mainly cattle rearers. But what happened was, because of this trading area there, Gujaratis became a migratory community, a lot of migration to and fro from Gujarat. And so if you look at the Gujarat society as such, it is very heterogeneous in both religion and language. So it's a very skillful community like that, Gujaratis. And they're very skillful business people, by the way, because they took advantage of that. So the second event that was very important in 1839, when the first, we say, a great-great-grandfather of our community came from, is this abolition of slavery. In 1833, this was happening. This act was passed. And because there was abolition of slavery, the British plantation owners, I mean, the slavery was being abolished, so they needed workers to work in the plantation. And so what happened was that the colonial government of India and the British plantation owners, they got together and then they subscribed to this scheme, Indian Indentured Labor System. It began in 1834. Can you see the correlation there? 1833, abolition of slavery, but the plantation people needed workers. So this scheme was threshed out, and between 1834 and 1917, when that system was abolished, 1 million Indians, indentured laborers, were moved from India to places like Fiji, Suriname, parts of South America, Caribbean islands, where there was plantations, and they used to work there. Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheries did not come out as indentured laborers. They came out as entrepreneurs, or they came out as traders, or they came out as explorers. They were explorers in their own right. This is what the history tells us. So, and the other thing that was very important was that in Kutch during 1820s, 1825, 1830s, there was a massive famine, massive. And so a lot of migration occurred from Kutch area. So when we look at the process, it's very important that you study one person's history, and it gives you a lot of, or rather wealth of information. And then, of course, it allows you to move into the records and then substantiate a lot more other things out of it. So the person that I looked at it was Haji Satchupira. Anyone knows about this person? Haji Satchupira? Very good. Now, he actually migrated he was born in 1836, migrated with his parent in 1839. Why? Because there was famine in Kutch, okay? He came via these sort of contraptions, dhows or ships, arrived in Zanzibar, and this is the philanthropist work, acculturation and transformation brought about by Al-Haj Satchupira. Now, I'm going to just talk very briefly about this personality. He was born in 1836, arrived at age 3 years to Zanzibar with parents. So the earliest presence in East Africa from record of the Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri Community outside India was 1839 according to our record. At age 5, that is 1841, whilst traveling to Kilwa, Kisiwani. Kilwa was a major trading port at the time, and everyone wanted to go there because it controlled a lot of shipping trade. So they were going there, and accident occurred, and the parents drowned. And then he lived with his masa. Anyone, what's the English equivalent of a masa? Uncle? Uncle is anyone, isn't it, in English? At least in our Gujarati language, there's a masa, masi, all sorts of, uncle is everyone. Okay, let's call him an uncle. Then he lived with his uncle in Zanzibar. But the official record shows that before 1856, he used to live in Mjimwema. This is a Kiswahili word for fishing village. And around that time, there were two Hindi person. Hindi person means two Indian person, and one of them was Marhum Satupira in 1856. Then Sultan of Oman, who then captured that particular coast, made Mjimwema, which is a fishing village, into a village, a healthy village, and he called it Mzizima in 1856. And then he himself extended Mzizima into a port called Dar es Salaam, which is abode or heaven of peace. And Germans then took over and removed the Sultan of Oman from those areas, and the Germans' rule began from 1891 to 1921, during which time Haji Satupira was absolutely influential. He was one of the three guys who was allowed to actually raise the German East African flag because of his influences, both within the establishment or German establishment, as well as his own community, African community, and Arab community. He was a very well-known personality. And his philanthropist, the masjid that I showed you in the previous picture, he actually built it with his son in 1907. That's the first Dar es Salaam masjid. I think you can remember that, or you've forgotten it. Ahmed? No, I've forgotten it. And then, of course, he also built the Imam Bara and Kabristan as well. So that is the transformation this personality brought about. There were many personalities like that who then brought about huge, substantial transformation in the community, to the extent that by 1964, there were so many jamaats. You understand what jamaat is? Yeah? Okay. Or shall I define it for you? You know, I mean, at least do that. I mean, it's like I'm in the Kabristan, you know. And, you know, please, if you interact with me like that, it'd be so nice. But you're so serious as an audience. Why is that? Muslim are serious?
No, it's listening. But,
it's not an interesting topic.
We need to know our roots.
Yeah, but doesn't mean that you should not smile or anything like that.
But you keep on picking at Ahmad only.
Ahmad is my friend. We used to work together in the same place. He remembers that. But, you know, he's being nasty to me. That's the deal. Right, okay. So at least you're all smiling now. So Jamaat, there were so many Jamaats in East Africa, right? So transformation was huge. And let me just give you one example here of the extent of transformation. I mean, we had Jamaats, we had masjid, imam baras, schools, dispensaries. And if you look at in 1960, there was a population carried out by the Supreme Council of Africa. There were almost 7,050 individuals and 1,500 to 2,000 families. But look at Kenya. There were 2,025 individuals, or rather 400 families, 83 different businesses with 5 towns. That was the transformation. Tanganyika, over 4,000 individuals, 606 different businesses in 42 towns. Zanzibar and Pemba, 1,900 individuals, 168 different businesses. Uganda, 2,875 individuals, 147 different businesses in 13 towns. This was the extent of the transformation that had occurred in East Africa by 1964. Let me just give you some indicators as to what it was like. I mean, they produced a directory consisting of over 400 pages. Half of it was trade directory, and half of it was all about the experiences of 57 different people, how they arrived in East Africa, what it was like, and all that. So this was sort of first-hand information from the very people who witnessed what it was like in East Africa, and that's fantastic.
So all of this,
Okay, yes. What was very important was the publication was in Gujarati, during 1950s to 1960, most of the Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri community read, wrote, spoke Gujarati. Trade language of this community was Gujarati. But not only that, Gujaratis dominated Asian trade in East Africa. And that's why we had to publish this directory in Gujarati so that the communication can occur, not only amongst our own people, but all other communities, all other Gujaratis, because they actually dominated the Asian trade. Now, I don't want to go into the colonial aspect of it, because that would take me far away. And when you invite me again, I can then give you the history of that. That's very interesting. We have got to make sure that the history of the Asians in East Africa that is written from an exploitative lens, that Asians were there to exploit. No, when you study the diaspora history, it gives you a different picture. That lens is a different lens from which this history was written. It was a colonial lens, and now that we are looking at our own record, we are finding out much more than that lazy history that we were given, that Asians were. I'm not saying that we did not have weaknesses, but I'm saying it's not true that Asians were there to exploit. Okay, so let's go into the next part. Now look, this is a flag. Can you see that? Yes. This is Gujarati માં આપણે કહીએ છીએ કોમી ઝંડો, means the flag of the community. Now look, this is our creation, or the community's creation by 1964. And what it symbolizes is very important. Look what it symbolizes. The green background represents Islam giving hope and generosity to human beings to progress their humanity. That was our objective in 1964. It still is. 12 stars here represents, surrounding the Kaaba, represents the 12 imams through whom knowledge of Islam reached the community. The Kaaba here in the center is our belief in Allah, wahdullah sharika lah. And then Hajar-e-Aswad here represents our only objective in life, which is to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the flagpole here represents the alam of Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam. The crescent has ukhuwa, brotherhood, written in it. And the panjo, you know, that's there. It says Ya Qayyam. That means we are under the wilaya of our 12th Imam. So this was the objective of the community at that time. It was much more universal in its outlook. That's why they created a flag like that to symbolize what the community objectives are. So let me just go a little bit beyond now. So what happened was that the religious values began to dominate. Ethnic cultural value was there, but this value began to dominate. And so the other thing that I looked at was then, okay, they were in East Africa, the first migration which took place outside India. So what happened in East Africa was interesting. That when the political turmoil started, migration began. 1964 Zanzibar Revolution. There, the migration was from Zanzibar to Dar es Salaam. The community was only 1,500 in 1964 in Dar es Salaam. Suddenly, 4,000 people came from Zanzibar, and the community became almost 6,000. And they worked together to make sure that the migrant community of Zanzibar got settled in Dar es Salaam. There's a good history of that. In 1972, there was this guy, Amin, dreamt that Asians were exploiters, and exodus of Asian occurred. And of course, the history in the West began with this 1972 Ugandan Asian exodus from our diaspora point of view. And if you look at the Ugandan Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri Asian experiences in this country, it's a very valuable experience and very, very important and deep-rooted experience that we need to make it historical. But nobody has done it. The Indian community have done it, but we as our community haven't done it. We haven't taken pictures and written statements from the community which arrived in 1972, which we should really be doing that. So what happened was then there was the 1991 Somali crisis. Up to here, most of the settlement within the East African community was done by Africa Federation here. But when the Kutch earthquake occurred in India, we had already formed World Federation. And so now there was much more of a globalized effort to resettle the community from the Kutch. And then of course Yemen crisis, which is the latest crisis, where there is quite a sizable community of ours there. And obviously the repatriation and all that was done by the global effort of the globalized Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri community. So all these crises eventually ended up with the hierarchy formation of the community organization. We had the Jamaats, and then we had the regional bodies, and then the World Federation. The aim always was the preservation of the unity and the Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri Muslim identity. I'm sure you'll ask me a question, but I'll answer whenever, if you have any. But that was the... So now what we have is a Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri community diaspora. We have Jamaats spanning 5 continents. We live in plural, globalized, informatized, and knowledge-based societies. We cross culture, religion, ethics, or boundaries of cultural, religious, ethical every day. And so that poses a challenge for our community, of course. Additionally, we find that individuals, our history suggests this, individuals and families get together in each other's houses, then they form a Jamaat, and then they form a regional federation. This structural organization was geographical. But once the connectivity came into the world and we became digitalized, now we are not as much connecting structurally or geographically, we are connecting more functionally. That means a Jamaat in Lindi can functionally connect with a Jamaat in London without going through these structures because of the connectivity.
And Lindi is in Serious?
Yeah. Don't know Lindi? Lindi in Tanzania. Okay, it's a small Jamaat in Tanzania. I just happened to mention Lindi because L is Lindi, L is London, right? Okay. So, can you understand the point I'm making, by the way? Right, thank you. The first challenge is one of change. When a community have a history of, like ours, we were part of a broader Khoja community, but we parted from the broader Khoja community based on faith, on Shia Ithna-Asheri faith. We came out from the broader Khoja community and became a very small, tiny community. And of course, there was a lot of challenges. There was a lot of injustices also, and there was a lot of bloodshed also that had to, when I say lot of, there was bloodshed also accompanying that existence. So what happened was the community built a very thick wall around it to survive, basically. This was who we were. This was our history because of the fact that we had to move out from the larger Khoja community and survive the smaller Khoja community based on faith. So no outsider, no different race, no different, values. So see, can you see that thick community there? Now, we can't survive in a globalized world like that because we are crossing culture, culture, religion, ethics every day. This would be very difficult for us to survive. But if we open up everything as a community, there won't be any community. If we sort of give maximum freedom, maximum individualism, maximum diversity, we'll become a very thin community or no community. So we have to find a very comfortable place between a thick community which has got a huge wall around it and a community which doesn't have any walls or any red lines. So how can we find a comfortable position from there, missing out that? Now, challenge of change, when you are, you know, in a 21st century globalized world, it's very uncomfortable sometimes. But we have got to do it. But we've got the vehicle to find a comfortable position. Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri Muslim community has a vehicle to move into a comfortable position. What is that vehicle? The core values. When you study the 100 constitutions of the 100 Jamaats that we have throughout the world, the core values are one of taqwa, of adala, of compassion, of fairness. All those are in the institution, in the constitution. So we have core values. And if we use the vehicle of the core values, then it is not beyond the wit of the Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri Muslim community to find a comfortable place. And that is what at the moment is going through. If you go to Canada, Australia, this is what's happening. We're trying to find a comfortable position. Did you understand that? Totally. That's very good. The second thing is challenge of identity. Now this is very important because I think I'm going to relate it to the UK. When we talk about identity, there are two things that we have to understand. How we identify ourselves. Is video all right? How we identify ourselves and how others identify us. It's very important. We may identify ourselves based on religio-ethnic identity, or just a religious identity, or just a national identity. But it's not up to us. It's others as well, how others identify us. They may identify you as Asian, Desi, Pardeshi, or they may identify you South Asians, Pakistani, Paki, something like that. So it's not only us, it's also others. So bear that in mind. What happened was from 1990s, Muslims in United Kingdom began to identify themselves as British Muslim. And this rise of Muslim identity came from Muslims themselves. They just did not want to identify themselves as Pakistanis or Indians. There was this movement within the Muslim community that we want to identify ourselves as British Muslims. So that came from Muslims themselves. But since 2001, people's understanding of Muslims changed. They could say Muslims are too religious, or conservative, or aggressive. And that's not how we want to be looked at. We don't look at it the way they're looking at it. But that's what their understanding is. And you can understand why, by the way. I don't want to get into that. You're a very intelligent audience here, right? So in some way, we began to lose the control of our identity. We don't have the control of media, do we? So we began to lose that. And when we started that we want to be called like that, here we started to lose the control. And what happened was there was a dual sort of aspect to it. There was a tension developing. What British Muslim wants to say about itself, how we want to be known about ourselves, we want to say, we Muslims are very balanced people. We are not aggressive, are we? No. Yeah. And what others want to say about British Muslims, how others view us. So there's a tension between the two, and our identity now is determined by this tension. Did you understand that?
Yes.
Do you want to clarify it? No. Okay. So now we go on to this point, fourth. Whilst there is acceptance of British Muslims as group identity, whilst there is that notion that we are British Muslims, in reality, underneath that umbrella of British Muslims, ethno-religious identity remain active. And we can see that when we look at various centers that we go to. Sorry, I'm putting my back to you. Is it okay? Right. Did you understand that? Now I'm just giving you a typical United Kingdom position, but I can give you Canadian position, I can give you East African position, I can give you Indian position, Pakistani position, like that. But we're just, because you are a United Kingdom audience, I thought that I will introduce that, yeah? This is the work of Dr. Tariq Moudud. Anyone know about him? He's a fantastic sociologist. I think you should try and sort of look at his work. So there are two trends. By and large, there is acceptance of the term British Muslims. We do see government establishment and workplaces adapting to the needs of religious minorities, including Muslims. But the struggle now and the uphill task now is about religious equality. In the same way, we used to think about racial equality and racial discrimination. So this is the upward, whilst this is something good, that is a work to be done. Understood? So now, my concluding thoughts, I think I might as well stand. Is it okay? All right. So my concluding thought. First thought, would Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri community survive? I've given you all those two challenges at least. How would it survive? Has it got the wherewithals to survive? That's the question I'm answering. But I'm looking at, because we are a business community, I've looked at this trading world and the economic system. Look at the difference. The movements was dictated here when our great-grandfathers started the journey. The movements were dictated by monsoon winds, right? The traders arriving in 18th century have to put down roots because when they arrived here, they just can't fly back. The ship will go after a year, or thou will go after 2 years, or something like that. So they have to put down roots. And many settled and developed because they had to put down roots. But when you come to the 21st century, which is a globalized economic system, traveling is different. Communication is very fast. And connections are superficial and less rooted. So what impact that will have in the community? These people who arrived rooted themselves in the land, formed the community, underwent the challenges. We are reaping the benefits of it. We are in that system now. Would it survive? These are the questions. These are my concluding thoughts. I haven't got answers complete yet. The second thought is, we as a Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri Muslim community were grateful to our great-great-grandfather or grandfather who gave us this title of Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri Muslim. It already started to give us that nurturing of multiple identity. And we just moved it across. We said we are Khoja by heritage. We are Shia Ithna-Asheri by our ideology and philosophy and Muslim. And we then adapted. We can be British, we can be American, we can be Canadian, we can be Indian, we can be Kenyan. But my concluding thought is this: would the diasporic and national link within the next generation of Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri stays or severes? Because there's a tension between the diasporic identity, Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri Muslim British, and the national identity, the movement of us being called, we are British Muslims. We just don't want to be known as Khojas now. We want to be known as British, not even Shias or Sunnis. We want to be known as British Muslims. So, what happened here? All right, okay. So, these are the concluding thoughts, two thoughts, okay? So, when I look at the ingredients within the community, it's interesting. The Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri Muslims have command of languages. Now, we're losing that, by the way. My father and his generation spoke almost 4 or 5 languages. Today, my son, Imran, will speak 3 or 4. But I mean, generally, if you look at it, our sons and daughters would only speak 1 or 2 at the most. And in my community, I can tell you, in the West, is only 1, and that's English in the UK. They don't even want to speak Gujarati or Kutchi. That's the regrettable fact. Why? I can give you another lecture on it because I've done the survey on that, okay? We have a fantastic community history which goes back 160 years. And in Islam, we go back 700 years. Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri Muslim. So we have a 700 years in Islam history and 160 years as a community. And it's a rich history. So today, if a Khoja boy is asked, who are you? You should be able to proudly say, I am a Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri Muslim, and I know exactly where I come from. Preserve your identity, because the biggest crisis in 21st century would be the identity crisis. If you don't know where you come from, others will still ask you who you are. Even if you speak the best lingo, they will say to you, but where do you come from? And who are you? And if my son cannot say where I'm from, he already starts to nurture a psychological issues in his mind. And then, of course, there is a fantastic networking versatility still there, and the core values. So we have got the necessary ingredients to preserve it, if we so choose. Now I just want to throw in a very nice little interesting thought for you. Look at the dress sense of these guys, yeah? Marhum Al-Haj Sachupira and Pirbhai Visram, fondly known as Pirbhai Kaka. How many of you have heard of Pirbhai Kaka? You have. You have. This is from Uganda, by the way. Yeah. Okay. So, so look at the dress sense. This is, I'm talking about early 18, late 18, early 19. Yeah? Late 90s, sorry. And then, this is Mombasa, 1904. Still the dress sense is subcontinental, yeah? And then when this Raja of Kutch visited Kalfan factory, one of the Khoja factory, in 1920, again the dress sense, look at them. Subcontinental, right? By 1960, tie, suit. This is 2000 London. There is this pagri here, which is a Kutchi pagri. We are symbolizing, right? We are appreciating our culture there. There's a jabbo there, and there is a shirt and trouser. This is 2000. Look at the dress sense, yeah? This is interfaith iftar in Dar es Salaam. Look at the dress sense, a jabbo, a coat there. This is the dress sense of 21st century, a gender participation. What do you learn from all this? This is what you learn. The impact, see, identity construction of the global Khoja Shia in the diaspora from the dress sense. I'm just throwing this in for you. Impact of Western education for suit and tie, and then the gradual economic and social separation from the place of origin, and then the domination of the Western wear, the suit, and then the hijab as an instrumentality to participate in the societal life and global living and plurality of dress sense. This can be a PhD for anyone. Interested? No. I just threw it in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope you found it interesting. Did you?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, sure.
1 second. Okay, thank you very much, Sibtain. We have some time for some questions. Do we have any questions? We've got one here. Any others?
Hello. Yeah. Okay. So thank you.
I appreciate the lecture first.
Yeah. No, that's what I'm
Thank
saying.
you.
I mean, that's the protocol.
All right. Oh, that's the protocol. Okay. Right.
Politicians. Okay.
Fine.
Yeah. So thank you for the lecture. I mean, it's. I came here with a premeditated question, but you've sort of addressed the area where I can ask this question now. You refer to the word diaspora. Now, the meaning of the word diaspora, it's very important to get that right. Right? Now, diaspora to me is that if I was born somewhere and I had gone away somewhere and I wanted to, then I was a diaspora from that location. As our generations go through, are they still the diaspora as far as definition is concerned?
Yeah, it's which angle you look at. If, for example, that community then integrates and there is no ethnization or transformation of that community, which you can see it as a living community, and it's integrated or assimilated, then diaspora may not, I can understand, may not have that meaning. But if you look at the diaspora history now, even if there has been a migration and an age of about 200 years of living in that particular community, there is still that contact with the ancient land of origin. There is still that cultural link with it. There is still that social cohesion with it, and that makes it diasporic.
So the question about how others see you, so to many people I've said, I'm African. They said to an Afghani secretary, she said, well, you're not African. I said, I was born in Africa. My father was born in Africa. Yes, historically I have a connection to India. I've never been there, but I was actually born in Africa. Yeah.
Well, you say now it's very interesting because I'm not only saying that you only have one cultural affinity. I mean, you may develop multiple cultural affinities through your own experiences. So by product, you are of three cultures. You are Indian, African, and here. So you can proudly say, I'm a product of three cultures, and that can also be diasporic. Because in a globalized world, it is moving from one to another.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sibtain.
Hi, how are you?
Very good.
Yeah.
I was not expecting anything less but a fantastic lecture. I've got so many questions, but I'll just stick to two. Firstly, I mean, I've studied this history as well, and it's very interesting seeing the comparisons with the Muslims moving westwards in Andalusia, Sicily, Greece, and the difference between when the Khojas came to East Africa, the parallels. So the first question I have is, why was it, and I did ask someone this before, I never really got an answer, why is it they didn't travel to another part of India to seek wealth when Gujarat was struggling and in famine and they were having difficulties from the British Empire and so on and so forth, where they may not have faced difficulties from the Brits and they'd have had better opportunities? Why was it Africa, which was a quite perilous journey? They were able to make those journeys on the dhows. And I've seen those dhows, and you find those same dhows in the Middle East still. The second question I have is, it's very well written by Andalusian Muslims. I think Asgherali, particular sociologist, writing especially about the dress sense, in that the conquered peoples 10 times out of 10 end up wearing the dress sense of their conqueror, that's mentally kind of being. The question I have is, those communities, Muslim communities, ended up forming their own identities in Andalusia and Sicily. They very much were no longer Arabs, even if they spoke Arabic, and they had multilingual capabilities as well. How was it that the Khojas that went to East Africa managed for so long to maintain till this day, a very strong sense of this deep-rooted ethnic and religious and sectarian ideology? How was it? What was it just trade?
No.
And if it was trade, because this is what you mentioned in the Gujarati language directory, they needed that directory because everyone trading was Gujarati. But now in the digital world, it's not so relevant.
Yeah, no, your question is very multi-layered, by the way. I mean, if I can just start with the first part of it, where you talk about why didn't they go to other part of India and they started to migrate towards the coast here. You have to understand one thing, that from 2nd AD onwards, the Indian Ocean trading world was very dominant. And Gujaratis were participating in that fully. As I said, that the official records say that every trading town will have a Gujarati, which means that the Gujaratis had the flair of going out of Gujarat, but also trading. So, and it was very easy for them to just go to the sea area, the west coast, where Gujarat has a boundary, and just move out onto the trading world. Not only did they go to Africa, but Gujaratis also went to Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, into Japan, China. So Gujaratis have gone very wide, and that could be one of the rationale as to why they went via the sea routes to trade. than to go into India, hinterland. Secondly, one very important question you asked is how come that we were able to preserve this identity for such a long time? So you have to look at the history.
It's such a specific identity.
A very specific identity, and it's got a very specific history. Very specific. If you look at the Khoja history, I mean now in Florida, they're studying Khojas. Why? Because they're finding it very interesting to study. They've got a fantastic history. But the important thing is that Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri Muslim community emerged from the syncretic Khoja community. Now when I say syncretic Khoja community, I mean that 700 years ago, peers from Iran and Afghanistan came to India and they started to talk about Islam. And there was already a Hindu religion there. And so what happened was that these peers and sayyids, when they wanted to convert, they didn't convert by way of force or this is correct and this is right, this is wrong. What they did was they looked at the history of the people. And from that history of the people, they started to talk about Islam within that. I don't want to give example because it would be too long an answer. But from that syncretic thought and ideas of Khoja communities emerged the Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri identity. And that identity emerged with a lot of hard work, and there were a lot of injustices as well in the process. So what happened was that they did not have land, they did not have oil wells, they did not have country. All they had was their own community and religion. And wherever they went, they formed an imambara. Imambara is the house where we talk about imams. We call it imambara and masjid. So imambara became the state for this particular community. Wherever they went, they constructed imambara, and that was the finalization of a state. So the community, wherever they went, the first thing they did was construct an imambara. Form a jamaat, construct an imambara. That was a statehood for us. And that's why in this globalized world, we were able to survive as a community because we had that ethos of surviving by using the culture aspect of it, the religious aspect of it, and our own historical position. That if we don't do that, we as a community will not survive in a globalized world. So the history has a lot of impact in a community which doesn't have a state, doesn't have a country, doesn't have a nationality. All it has is its own community and religion. That's why the flag, that symbol, that flag, Qawmi flag, is more Islamic than cultural.
That model, or your thick model, fits into that.
Yes, that's right.
And that's why it's causing us an issue now in the West.
Yes.
So we're not being able to.
Well, we are moving.
We
are moving now.
No choice.
No, we don't have a choice. We are moving because, but we have to find a comfortable position where we can create, we can keep the identity. But at the same time, yeah.
Yep,
Sorry, did I answer that or? Yes. Yeah.
Mansoor.
Thank you very much for the wonderful insight. I just want to ask you three things. The Khoja directory, is there a digital version?
Sorry, say it again.
The digital version, is there the Khoja directory? Is there a digital version?
Yeah, now it's been done, yeah. If you look at the Khoja Heritage Project of the World Federation, you will see, if you go into their site, they've just done the digital. So you will see the histories in Gujarati of our great-great-grandfathers and all that, yeah.
And the second thing is, can we write Khoja in our ethnic tick box things or other where it says? Because I'm about to write.
Ahmad, can they write?
Yeah, in other.
Yeah.
Can we write other?
Why not? If you write it, there's absolutely no. I mean, Khoja as an identity is accepted in the British. If you look at the British records, the Khojas are accepted as an identity.
So I'll
Yeah.
write there.
So you can write Khoja.
Well, I've been writing it for some time now.
Why not? Yeah. Why not?
And,
one should always be proud of one's own heritage. Yeah.
and the third was, I just wanted to say thank you for showing that flag. It brought up nostalgic memories back.
All right. Okay. Where do you come from?
Islam.
Oh, All right. So you
I was offended that you're only picking up Ahmed.
only because I know Ahmed, we work together. Or you don't remember that? Don't remember it, okay.
Siraj?
Unfortunately.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much
Oh,
for
right.
the talk. That was really interesting because I think especially for
Where is your background?
ask my uncle.
All right.
You've been picking on him the whole time.
Okay. Sorry.
Just I just wanted to pick up on the directory point. You know, how many 60 years ago we had a directory of all the traders in the Khoja world. Sorry, I put it close to me. Do we have anything like that now? Obviously, perhaps then there were a lot more entrepreneurs setting up their own businesses. But do we know what people are doing now and kind of the vast scale of it? You know, is there a sense that we may go to a stage where actually we may create another directory, actually see what's going on now, where people can network and build those connections in a way that helps us perhaps gain that identity or get stronger that way?
Yeah. There was the attempt to have a global directory by a few individuals and institutions as well. But regrettably, we failed. But I think things like that now are in the offing. We've found that our community is now wanting to understand what its roots are, what its heritage is, and particularly the young people now even want to learn the language Gujarati, which I think is not a bad thing. So if this movement becomes more of a dynamic movement, then hopefully what you are suggesting will occur. It should occur, really. In a globalized world, we should have a directory of our own where we can do networking quite easily with each other and have that corpus of identity of ours.
Someone can create Khoja LinkedIn, can't they?
Sorry, say it again.
Someone could surely create Khoja LinkedIn.
Khoja, oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. You know, the potential is vast.
We've got another question here from Ruhi.
Alaikum salam, Roy.
You know, you mentioned that the Khojas went to other places in East Africa, so that Japan.
Madagascar. Oh, okay, right. Yeah, other places, other side, yeah.
Yeah. Did any of those migrants establish communities? Did they develop differently from the East African Khoja community? Do we have any record of them?
Not that I know of, but this is not Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheries. I mean, Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheries throughout the world number 90,000 to 150,000, according to the statistics that I have. So it's really relatively a very small community. So when some of them did go, it would be just sort of 2 or 3 individuals who would have reached, or business people 5 or 10. But they would not necessarily would have formed a Jamaat. They would have come back. But when in 1933, the business people met and wanted to form a federation in India of Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheries, the records do show that businesses of Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheries, Kutchi, were as far as Burma and Japan. So we had, Khojas had traveled, Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheries had traveled, but they did not form Jamaats as we did in the eastern coast of Africa and Madagascar, and Aden as well.
I think about the business, I think the conference they had last year or this year, last year in Davos, I think they are trying to form a Khoja like business hub or something. So I think it is in the offering as far as I understand.
Yeah.
When you asked me the question about your Khoja, I said I don't know my identity, right? What I'm trying to say is that when people came from East Africa, who are traders, like one of my ancestors, they were as well. So were they necessarily from Gujarat as Khojas? They might have been just Gujaratis, but not Khojas.
Yeah, I mean, the Khojas of our communities have come from Gujarat, Kutch and Kathiawar. That is historically. But there are many Khojas who are not from Gujarat, and that those elements of it is being studied academically now. But I'm more interested in our own community and the records that I have. And from there, I can say that our Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri Muslim communities mainly came from Kutch and Kathiawar.
So what I'm trying to say is, so there might have been sects. For example, somebody from Gujarat came to East Africa, might not necessarily be Khoja, but because they're Gujaratis, they came from that, and then maybe they became Shias, and they integrated into the Khoja community because they spoke the language, you know.
Not many did it.
Yeah, so I'm just saying,
Yeah.
this is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
That so not necessarily that you have everybody who came from Gujarat might have been Khoja. This is what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to find an
Sorry, did you say not everybody who came from Gujarat are Khojas?
Yeah.
No. Listen, Khojas were only minority of people who came from Gujarat. There were many other Gujaratis, non-Khojas, who were inhabiting East Africa. But they were called Gujaratis. So Khojas were there, Bhatiyas were there, Hindus were there, all cultural people were there who were Gujaratis.
No, I meant would have been Gujaratis but Muslim as well.
Yes, of course.
Not being Khoja
No.
necessarily.
Yeah,
so there
that
might
is
be in East Africa who might people might understand that the people might think that they are Khojas because they are Shia Ithna-Asheries and from Gujarat, but not necessarily so Khojas, right?
I don't understand, Ahmed, what...
So if I'm Mr. X came from Gujarat,
Yes,
yeah, became a Shia,
right. Became a Shia in East Africa?
yeah,
Right.
and not so he wasn't
Right.
a Khoja from before.
Okay.
And they became part of the Jamaat anyway because it's
Part of which Jamaat?
and a Khoja Jamaat because there might not have been other Gujaratis, Shia Ithna-Asheries.
Well,
And
according
so
to the
they're not
record,
Khojas in that sense.
according to the record, there is no such thing. There is no. I can tell you that. If there was, I would have given you an example, but I haven't seen it. But if there was, you're making just a broader point, or
Yeah, it's a broad-
yeah,
It's a broader point because you know you're talking about how the Jamaat is developing, right, and how integration and so on. So, for example, the Constitution of the World Federation, which I was involved in making, the first one, it was here. When we were making, when we were having this constitution, so until that time, members could only be from the Khoja community. So even if you married somebody who is from the outside the Khoja community, they cannot be a member, therefore not part of the community in that sense, right? But then at that time, the constitution was changed to say that if your spouse, if you marry somebody who is not a Khoja and is a spouse, so that person automatically becomes a member of the Khoja community. So you could see indirectly, a person can become a Khoja. These are examples I know for, I even know the people who are involved in it, who have become Khojas, but still their identity, their original identity is not a Khoja.
you say all this is changing now. All this is changing.
So it might have happened then.
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
not aware of.
It obviously, as I said, thick community is changing now because, look, my father had 6 children. His children only had 3. So a time will, if you remain restrictive like that, a time will come when the community will only be 50,000, and then 25,000, and then extinct. So you don't want to go down that path. Things are changing now because the circumstances are leading us to get into a position where, for example, we will have to open the membership, for example. And it has been opened in many Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri institutions. But it is open in a managed way so that there is stability. But you are right, at one time, only a Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri could become a member. But in many instances, as you quite rightly pointed out, the definitions have been extended. And I am one of those who would say that the definition of Khoja would change in time. It would not be the way we understood it. I think we'll have to craft another one. That's my version, by the way.
Okay, just for information, I was recently in Dar es Salaam and I was put into the Jiba Tanzania WhatsApp group, and it's excellent. People ask for contact details and stuff like that. Huh? Jafferi, whatever. I was a president of once. But anyway, so I'm just saying that there is, they've actually...
Jaffer International Business Association. Yeah.
But what they've done, they've pioneered this. They've got 4 WhatsApp groups and got 250 on each group. So it's a big business community, and they ask for people looking for something, products, services, everything. So I'll show you examples of it there. The question I want to ask is that, you slightly touched it on the last question, is that what's the future of the Khoja Shia community? Yeah, if you understand what's the history, what's the projection, long distance projection about where will we be in 500 or 50 years, 500 years?
You know, I just talked to you about the ingredients that we saw, that there are useful ingredients within the community in terms of networking, versatility, in terms of languages, in terms of core values, and in terms of community history. So if you were to ask me what is the future of the community, I would say that the 3 very important foundations of the community, the family, the member, and the madrasa. If these 3 institutions are preserved and are able to lead the community in the right way, lead the community in our challenging times, make sure that the solutions are found, both in terms of life of the family, in terms of the future generation of ours, so the right type of education, both religious and secular, and of course the guidance that comes from member, in particular the contemporaneous guidance that we absolutely need, then I see the future of the community very bright, because it has survived for 160 years. I see no reason why it can't survive. It is not beyond the wits of the Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri to survive and play a very useful part in the bringing of Shia and Muslim Ummah. Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. But we have the whereabouts of Islam. What we have to make sure that we understand the very nature and essence of Islam in the right way.
Okay, we'll have one final question from Musaddiq.
Thanks for your talk. When I saw the picture of such a period, my ears perked up, because for my mother, that's the 3rd generational direct paternal
Really?
descendant.
MashaAllah. Yeah.
So just 2 questions. I mean, people have touched on some of it. So the first one is, what differences do you see, say, from the early 20th century to now, in the balance between ethnoculture and religion, in terms of the identity of the community as it expressed itself? So in East Africa at that time and versus now, is one stronger than the other? Has there been a shift, and does that make a difference? And then secondly, what you were touching on just now, between thick and thin. So, but more specifically, so I'm more interested to hear kind of, to what extent do you think that the community is navigating the issues of the outsider, and specifically gender? And so, but really more specifically rather than generically.
You mean gender?
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 Gender.
Right, okay. Oh yeah, to your first question about the 2 positions of the community, the early and the now, I think I wrote a paper on, are we losing the sense of Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheri identity? And my sense was that yes, we were losing our sense of identity, only because we haven't really passed on the sense of heritage of this community to our generation, our children. And because they don't have any sense of what Khoja means or what community means, they're just swimming in the community, taking all the benefits of the community, but they don't have absolutely any idea how to contribute within the community. They expect that in 50 years' time, there will be a burial committee in the Khoja Shia Ithna-Asheries, and they will bury me. In Florida, in Orlando, last year when I was there giving seminars on Awakening Project, I put a question to them. I said, in 50 years' time, who will be burying you? Would it be artificial intelligent robot? Would it be an undertaker? Or would it be a Ghusl Kafan committee? And they started to think seriously, because that's a very serious question. There are no replacement coming for Ghusl Kafan here. So where are we going to get the volunteers from? So in that sense, we were losing the identity, but the institution of the Khoja community has taken particularly this particular bull by horn. What do you call it? Bull by the horn, yeah? Bull by the horn. Yeah, it's 9. What's the time now? Bull by, and so they have started the Khoja Heritage Project. They're involving the youngsters now. They are taking groups to India to show where their great-grandfathers came from. So all that is becoming more interesting, and as well as the interest in the language. So if you ask me, there is that sense of weakness, which is really our fault, but now they're thinking of introducing the history of Khojas within the madrasa institutions and all that. So our generation know, our young generation know what their identity is. So that's one. The second question that you posed about gender, about outsider and all that, let me tell you, and let me be frank with you, we are brought to that, kicking and screaming, to accept membership of the gender and all that. So now if you look at the constitution, in the West particularly, every constitution is gender equal, including in Africa as well. The thing is that the female participation is still low. We would like, of course, in our institution, the female participation to be much more active. And that is not their fault. They're coming now. It's not the female part of our community's fault. They're coming now, and once they get more confident, I'm sure they will take leadership positions as well. Leadership position, I mean. Outsider, I don't see an issue. I don't see an issue like I told you, that the meaning and the definitions of Khojas will change. It will change. I don't want to start giving an example of, in my own time as a Secretary General, what happened. But I can tell you that we will find a way of making, you don't have to, you know, normally a Khoja cannot be, he has to be born in a community. He has to be a Khoja by birth. But we will change the definition by virtue of the fact of our history. And we will create another definition of Khoja. I am sure of that. If not by way of words, in a pragmatic way. Because mostly we are pragmatic people. As a community, we are very pragmatic. We are Gujarati. We are Gujus. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we will end there. I think you've ignited a lot of interest. I think there's a lot of questions still to be asked. Are you around a bit afterwards?
I am going to have my tea.
Yeah. Whilst you're drinking your tea, I'm sure we'll disturb you and ask you lots of questions. Thank you so much, Sibtain Uncle. Salawat.
Just want to share this country with my family.